Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the IS34 Vlog Series. This is episode number 14 of the IS34 Vlog Series. And on this episode of the IS34 Vlog Series, I'm going to talk about why Carl Meninger is my favorite Left Behind character. Now, the Left Behind series is my favorite fandom. I'm a huge fan of Left Behind series and Left Behind the Kids series. I've been a big fan of it ever since I was in middle school. I've read the books, I've seen the films, I'm a huge fan of the Left Behind franchise, especially the Left Behind the Kids series. I've always been a big fan of the Left Behind franchise. I've always been a big fan of Left Behind franchise ever since middle school when I first found the books during my 7th grade year. So anyways, on this episode of the IS34 Vlog Series, I figured I would talk about why Carl Meninger is my favorite Left Behind character. Carl Meninger is my favorite Young Tribulation Force member and my favorite Left Behind character overall. And let me explain why. Carl Meninger was first introduced in the 16th book of the Left Behind the Kids series, Fire from Heaven. And in this book, now there were spoiler alerts for those that haven't read all the books in Left Behind the Kids series, but the books have been out for 20 years now, so at this point it's no longer a spoiler issue because these books have been out for a very long time. But anyways, in the 16th book of the Left Behind the Kids series, Fire from Heaven, we're introduced to Carl Meninger for the first time. So Carl Meninger is John Preston's shipmate on the Peacekeeper 1, and what happened is that John Preston was drafted by the Global Community Navy after the Wrath of Lamb earthquake. John was at his college, and the earthquake attacked the whole world. The school went through some damage. John escaped from his classroom, and he was later helping people that were injured in the earthquake. And then John told the global community came over to the college looking for people that were healthy and fit. And John told them he was a first-year engineering student, and the GC peacekeepers or officers told John to get in the truck, and that John didn't have a choice. So John had to go with them, had to go inside the global community, he had to work inside the global community Navy, and it was on that ship, the Peacekeeper 1, that he met Carl Meninger and became a friend of his. So Carl Meninger introduced to Carl in the 16th book of Left Behind the Kids series. When John meets Carl for the first time on the Peacekeeper 1, Carl takes John under his wing. Despite the fact that John has only known Carl for a short amount of time, the two of them become friends. So Carl takes John under his wing because Carl knows a lot about technology, knows a lot about computers, about equipment, about technology. Carl is very fascinated with computers. He knows a lot about computers. And that's why he's my favorite Left Behind character overall, because he knows so much about computers and about technology, and that makes him my favorite Left Behind character overall. So anyways, the second trumpet judgment in Left Behind the Kids series is about to attack the ship. And John and Carl are both on the Peacekeeper 1, and John and Carl are on the Peacekeeper 1, the global community ship, and the second trumpet judgment is about to hit. And the second trumpet judgment is basically a meteor from heaven that's going to strike the Atlantic Ocean. 1/3 of the ships will be sunk, and 1/3 of the creatures in the water will be destroyed and killed. And so John is worried about the meteor, and he wants to tell Carl about his beliefs in God. So John tries to find Carl, and he tells him tells him he needs to talk to him, and then Carl says things are going crazy, and he says they're talking about shooting down the meteor before it hits, and Carl says that if they don't shoot down the meteor, there's no way any of them will survive, and John sees a simulation of the meteor hitting the water, and he realizes that Carl is right. No way could anybody survive that. So the captain gives the bad news that that Carpathia and the global community have decided not to shoot down the meteor, and the Peacekeeper 1 crew are all upset about this news, but then the captain offers some good news, that he's recovered the submarine, and if the submarine can travel far away from the ship travel as far away from the ship as possible, some of the crew members of the Peacekeeper 1 may be able to survive. And the captain tells him that he's trying the best he can to get the ship away from the splashdown point, but if the scientists are right, there's no way they'll outrun the meteor. So the captain starts to draw names to enter the Peacekeeper 1 submarine, and there's only 7 seats available up for the crew, because 5 of the seats on the submarine have been given to some hostages that were rescued by Jim Pelton, a diver on the Peacekeeper 1. So therefore, those hostages, there's 5 hostages that were rescued. So those hostages are given seats inside the Peacekeeper 1 submarine, and only 7 seats are available for the Peacekeeper 1 crew. So the captain draws names, and the 6th name the captain calls out is John Preston's name. And Carl pats him on the shoulder, and John sinks to his knees, but he realizes that he hadn't told the members of the Peacekeeper 1 the message about his beliefs, and that he hasn't told Carl about his beliefs. So John tells Carl about his beliefs after the last name is called. He tells Carl about his beliefs in God, but then Carl says that he doesn't believe in that stuff. He can't buy it, and the captain tells John to get off the ship if he wants to leave. If he wants to leave, he has to leave now. So then John tells the captain that he would like to give his spot to Carl, and then, Carl is shocked by this, but John writes in his Bible, gives Carl stuff he needs to know. He writes down an email address for Mark, his cousin Mark Eisman, and for the Young Tribulation Force. And if John tells Carl that if he makes it back, to look up his friends online and tell them what happened. So, and Carl staggers, says, "You can't do this. He can't do this." Now he hardly knows him, and then John says he knows what he's doing. So John enters the submarine. Carl enters the submarine. Carl enters the submarine, and then the submarine heads away from the splashdown point, heads towards the bottom of the ocean. So anyway, the meteor heads towards the bottom of the ocean, and John gets inside the Peacekeeper 1's control center. He talks to everybody in the ship about his beliefs in God, and eventually John is able to tell people about his beliefs, and some people receive the mark of the believer. And then 30 minutes later, the ship is sunk. All the crew members are killed, including John and Jim. John Preston and Jim Pelton both die when the ship goes down when the ship plunges into the ocean. John dies from drowning, being the 3rd member of the Young Tribulation Force to die. But Carl and 5 other members of the Peacekeeper 1 crew survived the splashdown. So Carl is inside the hospital for a very long time because of what happened in the Peacekeeper 1, and that's why I wasn't able to reach Mark and the other members of the Young Tribulation Force sooner. So Carl tells Mark about what happened. He explains, once Carl and Mark meet up, Carl sends Mark emails to meet up with him and tell him what happened. And then Carl tells Mark about what happened with John, and that's one of the reasons why he wanted to see Mark. But he also wanted to tell Mark about the GC's plan to catch more believers and trap more believers. So Mark tells Carl it was stupid to tell the GC about John's beliefs in God, but Carl said he thought he was doing the right thing. And Carl insists to Mark he's not trying to sell out, Mark and the other members of the Young Tribulation Force, because when Mark and Carl meet for the first time, the judgment of the locust hits, the 5th trumpet judgment hits, the judgment of the locust hits, and so therefore Carl is shoved into a car by Mark, and Mark and Carl pray for him to become a believer, and then Carl becomes a believer, and the mark of the believer appears in his forehead, the seal of God, and therefore the locusts no longer want to bite him, and they leave him alone. So therefore Carl is one of them now. So therefore Carl is not gonna like betray his new brothers, his new family. So Carl's not gonna betray them. He tells Mark about the GC's plan to trap more believers, and he tells them that he wants to warn those people that the GC is looking for before it's too late. So Carl continues to work inside the GC. So Carl continues to work inside the GC, continues to like feed the Young Tribulation Force information, continues to work inside the GC, and then later, eventually, Vicky Byrne is able to like interrupt Z-Van's concert via satellite and talk to the believers via satellite, talk to kids attending the satellite schools about her beliefs in God, and then Carl Meninger helps that to occur, and Carl has to eventually flee the GC because of that. But still, Carl works very diligently inside the global community, is able to feed Young Tribulation Force a lot of information, and is very helpful to the group at times, numerous times. I mean, Carl is an underrated character. You know, he's honestly hasn't had that much moments in the series. He's only appeared in like 7 books of Left Behind the Kid series. And he's my favorite Left Behind character overall. It's a personal opinion. Carl Meninger makes one more appearance after he flees GC in book 35 when he's with Luke and Tom in South Carolina, and that's the last we see of Carl. He's never seen the series ever again after that. He's mentioned one last time in Triumphant Return as being a part of the Tribulation Force in South Carolina, but that's pretty much it. You know, Carl is a heavily underrated character because he doesn't get as much screen time. Well, I can't say screen time. He doesn't get as much appearances in Left Behind the Kid series as he should. You know, he doesn't get as much appearances. He doesn't get as much appearances in Left Behind the Kid series as he should. He doesn't get as much attention. He doesn't get as much, you know, attention or as much mentions. He's not written about that often as compared to some of the other members of the Young Tribulation Force, as some of the other members of the Young Tribulation Force. So yeah, that's why I feel like Carl is a heavily underrated character. But yeah, Carl Meninger is my favorite Left Behind character. I believe he's a heavily underrated character. He's good with technology and equipment. He's very brave. He's very brave working inside the global community, and he's very helpful towards the Young Tribulation Force. He's helped out on numerous occasions, and he's tried to warn people about his beliefs and help to spread the message about his beliefs. So therefore, those are the reasons why Carl Meninger is my favorite Left Behind character. And I hope I made my points abundantly clear. So take care, everybody. Another video from the Taunville Middle School channel. Take care, everyone.